Welcome to my TikTok Friends, the podcast about the app where everyone goes viral. And I've unintentionally turned this into a monthly podcast. I'd really like it to be a bi-weekly podcast, so you can look for the next episode to come out in 2 weeks. I'm going to go for that. I've already got my next interview booked. I'm going to speak with my next guest tomorrow. We're going to have a great time talking about what they post on TikTok, and then I will post that in 2 weeks. It really isn't about time management for me. It is just about getting the job done. And the one thing I've had to do, I guess it is a little bit about time management, which I'm trying to get better at. I really am trying to get better at time management, but I've got a lot of things going on. This is like one of 5 different podcasts that I produce. And so sometimes time gets away from me. So this week is my K-Tel record collection, otherwise known as Gen X Steve. And Steve is an awesome guy. He's a lot of fun. He's a great TikTok friend. He plays my movie trivia games every day and gives his answers, whether or not he's got it or not. And he's a big fan of the difficult trivia. I recently switched over to a more difficult trivia game, and everyone else is kind of not complaining, but people are saying, this is too hard. I don't know these answers. And Steve's like, let's bring it on. Give me the tough questions. So he's having a great time with the trivia. So Steve posts about, as very stated in his username, his K-Tel record collection. And we talk about K-Tel records in our conversation, what K-Tel records is, its history, its connection to Winnipeg, where I'm from. And he talks about how he started his collection and what he does on TikTok. We also talk about movies, as I often do. It always comes back to movies for me in some way or another. So we talk about the current state of movie theaters and just the general state of TikTok as well. He talks about some of the tips and tricks he uses to try and get more views, or what he used to do, and now he kind of plays it more straight. But still, lots of really interesting stuff in this conversation. Without further ado, here is my TikTok friend, my K-Tel record collection. Friends on social media like this, you don't really know, and they always know their first names, right? Because they're always part of your username.
Yeah, exactly. And well, actually with mine it's Gen X Steve, but it's just like my K-Tel record collection is is kind of what everybody calls me, or people call me K, or
I see. That's what I see when I see your videos pop up. It says my K-Tel record collection. So that's how I think of you. It just says my K-Tel record collection, even though I don't have a K-Tel record collection. You do.
Yep.
And I want to get into like what kind of videos you make and how you make them. But first, maybe for our audience, those who don't know, can you explain what K-Tel Records is?
Absolutely. Basically, K-Tel was a Canadian company, actually out of Winnipeg, coincidentally enough, that started back in the 60s. And they were one of the originators of compilation records, where you would have like a certain theme, like you would have, say, 50s rock and roll songs, or you would have like the current hits of the day. And then they would have as many records as they could, or sorry, as many songs as they could physically put onto a record album. And then they would have multiple of these that were published every year.
Yeah,
And so, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and they're famous for their ads. Their commercials were all over the place. They had these really loud, attention-grabbing ads. K-Tel presents the hits of whatever it is, and they had this kind of tone to them. And yeah, I'm familiar. I'm from Winnipeg, so I'm very familiar with the company. Although I didn't know until I was an adult that it was a Winnipeg company. But it is something that's very well known here in the city. K-Tel Records is from Winnipeg.
Yeah, and it was huge in all across Canada back in the 60s and 70s, and even into the 80s to a certain extent. But that was kind of their heyday, was right in the 70s. And where I grew up in Calgary, I mean, basically, I would get 2 or 3 K-Tels a year from grandmas and aunts and uncles as presents, and that's how I kind of built my collection of all these wonderful albums.
Did
And
you?
then they also, sorry, they also did products as well. So that say Crazy Carpets, which everyone is familiar with from the 70s, that was a K-Tel product. They had something called the Bigfoot, where you walk around in the snow, and supposedly you had snowshoes that look like Bigfoot feet, and just different weird and wonderful things like that.
That's right. And so you just liked these albums as a kid, or was it just that you liked music and they knew these were like albums that had a bunch of different things on it, so they gave them to you for that reason?
Well, basically, what it was that my dad was a huge music fan, and then so he kind of got me going in music, and then in every genre of music. Like when I visited my grandma's, I'd listen to like old 1920s and 30s music. So it's always been a part of my life. And then just over time, I've just accumulated so many of these things. Like I would say, all told, I've got probably around, I'm guessing maybe 8,000 albums now.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's just one of these things that I was part of, say, the Columbia Record Club, and back in the 80s. And then so while everyone was switching to CDs, I still stuck with vinyl. And then so I just accumulated it. And then people had their disco collections they got rid of at the end of the 70s. And they just said, here, give them to me, I'll take them. And it just, not that I'm a hoarder, but just things organically grow over time.
That you get known as the record collector in your group, right? The one who collects in.
Yeah,
Oh, here's a big box from the basement. We haven't listened to these in years, and they
yeah,
give you that party.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then a lot of them are duplicates of things I already have, so I just sort of pass those along. And but yeah, there's always interesting things that I haven't had exposure to, and so yeah, pretty much I've got a collection that's from, say, 8 tracks and cassettes and CDs and vinyl albums, all the way from, say, the early 1920s up until current.
And so, I mean, your name on TikTok is my K-Tel record collection because you feature the K-Tel records, but you have much more than that. What is it about K-Tel specifically that made you want to create the TikTok account?
Basically, what it was I was got into TikTok back in, say, early 2022, and I was just sort of gone in poking around like most people do, and then I just figured that I would do something that was kind of interesting to create an account. So actually, I had 2 other accounts prior to this one, and so I got into internet marketing, and then. Uh, I figured out kind of how to do clickbaity, spammy type stuff, and I grew an account to 125,000 followers, and I had videos with like 4 million views and things like that. And then got a little bit too scammy, and so they shut me down. And then so I thought, well, that was fun, but I wanted to do something that was more of a passion kind of account. And then so I looked around my house, and I've got tons of VHS tapes. I've got tons of DVDs, and then I've always kind of been sort of the Gen X kind of memorabilia, retro reminiscing, and then I just thought, well, there's enough accounts out there that do that kind of thing, and then so I looked around and I said, well, I got a ton of these albums, so I could either do like a disco account, which is a bit of more of a niche, but KTEL, because I've got all of those albums, like I've got probably maybe 500 different K-Tel albums, plus thousands of other compilations. So I thought, well, that's a really good niche for me. And then so that's sort of what I went with. And then the first few videos were pretty shaky. I got 30 views, kind of a thing. And then eventually you find your voice, and then you build up your account from there.
Yeah, and you kind of have faith in the algorithm's going to help you find the people who are interested in that kind of stuff, right? Like it's you make that kind of content. It's similar to other people making similar kind of content, and it finds the other people out there.
Yeah, exactly. And then with the stuff that I do with KTEL, there's enough different sort of offshoots from it, like the whole Gen X looking back 40 years kind of accounts. Those are, everyone has had one of those kinds of albums. And then once in a while, I'll put out an old commercial from the 80s or the 70s if I can find them, and then it just sort of gets people talking, and like, oh, I remember that commercial, or I remember that song, and that's what sort of builds the kind of engagement that every TikTok creator looks for.
It's a nostalgia is a powerful tool. Hey, it just really gets you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems everyone's got a story of they're driving in their car with this song, or they put the 8 track in, or they remember the cassette of that, and or I scratched my record at a party, and all those different stories that everyone has. And so you just sort of try and drive that kind of engagement with your account to get people talking.
Yeah, and I with something like K-Tel, I mean, there's so many different records and so many different genres of music. You have so much to talk about, and that's what I like when I do my trivia videos. For example, it basically each card I pull is an excuse to talk about 3 different movies, and so that's really the whole point of it. Whether or not I get the questions right, is good, but it's really the just to create something for people to talk about, for people to remember, for people to share, and that's what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you have enough interest and you have enough variety of source material that you can leverage against, like I've got, say, like 40s and 50s music that obviously there's not a lot of people that are in their 90s on TikTok, but there's people that like punk rock, and there's other people that like country, and then others that like sort of 70s classic rock, and sort of if you've got those variety of albums, then you just pick one song out every now and then that sort of strikes a chord with somebody, and you just sort of build a conversation, and you find something that appeals. And like, say, for one of my videos that I've had that had the most engagement was actually the mini pops.
Course, of course. That one, I think, well, for Gen X, for someone like myself, I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and it's a very strong thing for me growing up. Those were big in the 80s, right? The little kids singing the current hits. So yeah, absolutely, that must have been huge for you.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, so I mean that one, and that was one of the few times that I tried to kind of create a little bit of controversy to say, well, I find it cringy and it didn't appeal to me as a 19-year old at the time, and
Yeah.
I thought it was stupid, and just something that it just sort of drove some bit of conversation. And yeah, I just got a ton of engagement going, oh my gosh, you're an awful person. And
I have to admit, I get a bit tired of the generation battling that goes on all social media. I think it happens everywhere, where it's like Gen X versus millennials and all this other stuff. That's a bit much. I don't care about that. It is cool to identify with other people just based on your age and kind of the time that you grew up. And it's cool that we do all have these common experiences that we share, even though we didn't live in the same place, like in different parts of Canada, thousands of kilometers away, but we still had similar childhoods, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that with Gen X, all the different TikTok accounts, a lot of them are like, well, we drank from the garden hose, or we ran out at night, and when the street lights came on, you had to come home. All those sort of standard tropes that some of these Gen X accounts have. And then so I just want to do something a little bit different. And because back at that time, there was no internet, there was no streaming music, anything like that. So, I mean, albums and cassettes and 8 tracks, that was how you got your entertainment and your music. So it kind of becomes a touchstone there that is pretty common if you're, say, 40 or above, which is kind of the my demographic, is at
Okay.
40 to, I don't know, maybe even 75, let's say. And then so and so you just try and appeal to people kind of within that age range. And yeah, I've got a lot of the regular followers that come in and go, wow, it didn't really strike a chord with me, but I like you, so I'll just keep following you.
That's
And
nice.
then yeah, you've got other ones there that they kind of dive in and dive out as you got something that's specific to them. So
Right. But you also have kind of something I learned from your account, some tips and tricks. We had a record player when I was a kid. It was like my parents had records, I think right up until the late 80s, I want to say, always very late in adapting new technology. We also didn't get a VHS until I was in my early teens. But For records, you showed a trick where you put coins. This is you do all your videos on this little record player. It's like a little open record player. It's actually that looks like it's really easy to shoot. Did you choose it for that reason? That's
actually, it was funny because I had one of those as a kid. Uh, a relative gave me one, and then it got given away or sold or whatever, something over the years. And I've always wanted to get another one back. So basically, it's a little plastic case. It looks almost like a kid's lunchbox, and
oh,
it's really really tiny, so that the actual record actually uh, hangs over top of the whole unit itself. But it's super portable. I've done videos out on my back deck, and just different places, just because you can haul it around and take a couple records and shoot a video pretty much wherever you got some power.
and the way you have it
So
set up on the screen, you open it up, you have the record going, you have the album set up right behind it, so we can see the art of the album as it's playing. It's all very good for vertical video, I find.
yeah, absolutely. And I've kind of do it specifically for that. Like I've got like a nice high end home stereo that I actually do listen to a lot of my albums on. But for when I'm recording videos, I just use my little lunchbox record player because it's old and it kind of has that tinny sound, and it's sort of like the sound that people would have had back in the 70s or 80s because that's where the technology was at the time. So yeah, it's a nice little reminder of how things used to be.
And it's actually coming back. I mean, it's funny that you say, you talk about all the different forms of music before we got to the digital, which is, I guess, what we're currently in. But vinyl seems to be the one thing that's stuck around over the years. Hey, like CDs, I don't think have ever really had a resurgence in popularity. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but vinyl has always kind of been popular, and lately it's become very popular. I saw record players on sale at Walmart the other day. Pretty much the exact kind of same thing that you have, but it also had a Bluetooth speaker built in. I'm gonna go pick one up next time I go back. Oh, I shouldn't get into collecting vinyl. I know that's a slippery slope, but
Well, part of it is that if you ever move anywhere, it's really heavy
yes, I
to
yes.
to haul them because I've got boxes of albums behind me that I'm looking at, maybe 1,000 or 1,200 albums there, and they're like hundreds and hundreds of pounds. So
But what do you think it is about vinyl that's kept it going?
the biggest thing I find is that a lot of people really like the richness of the sound because there's a lot of discussion there that streaming or CD digital sound isn't as sort of clean, or you don't get as much richness to it. I'm not sure the technical terms of it, but it seems that vinyl, it's more of an experiential type of a way of listening to music, because basically what you have to do is you have to take it out of the sleeve, put it on your turntable, you have to clean it, make sure everything is precise. You listen to the first side, usually that's anywhere from say 17 to 20 minutes normally, and then the first side is over, then you flip it to the other side. So it becomes more of an event rather than just background noise.
Hmm. It's more tactile, right? You're involved more in the experience. And the other, I was I'm got myself off track, but the trick I was talking about is that you put the coins on the arm. Is it called an arm? I should know what this is
Yep.
called. And to keep it down. If it skips, if it's got a lot of scratches on it, the record's not in great shape. You can put some weight on the arm to hold it down so the needle stays against the grooves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because some of the ones that I have, like the ones that I've had since I was a kid, I've taken care of them and maintained them. But other ones that I find or people have given to me, they're just all scratched to heck from parties, or people spilled stuff on them, that sort of thing. And then so sometimes the needle will bounce around and it'll skip, or it'll get a warp in it from heat. And then so the way that you kind of mitigate that is you put some weight right on the very end of the tone arm, where the actual needle sits on the groove of the record. And then
Mhm.
so it, back in the old days, you put a quarter, nickels on there, and put however many it took to make the skip go away. But the other side of that is that if you put too much weight on it, you'll wear out the grooves of the album, and then so eventually you won't have any sound anymore. Because basically what it does is it scrapes away the vinyl itself just microscopically, but eventually the sound quality just is completely gone.
Mhm. Do you care about like the monetary value of your collection at all?
Actually, it's funny because I haven't even really thought about it. In just January of this year, I started putting it onto a site called Discogs, which is an inventory type site where you put in specific numbers that are stamped into your record, and then it'll tell you like which version and what you have. Like, say, for example, you have a Beatles record. You can have the original one, say from 1964, that's worth potentially several hundreds of dollars, or
Mhm.
you can have a reissue 14th copy of one, and that might be worth 10 or $20. And then so I've put probably, I want to say close to 2,000 albums that I've got so far, about maybe say roughly a quarter of my collection. And it's already sitting at, I don't know, somewhere around 40 or $50,000. So yeah, so I didn't even really think about it, but some of the records that I've had forever, that I've listened to just maybe a couple times. Like, say, for example, I bought one from the Columbia House Record Club from Metallica. I listened to it a couple times and then I just put it away. And I put that on the Discog site and I found out it's worth almost $1,000. And I think paid, I don't know, $10 for it back in the
Oh
80s.
wow. That's like getting Star Wars toys like back in the day, having those original Star Wars toys. Did you have those too?
Oh yeah,
Oh, damn it.
yeah,
Damn you.
yeah. Anything there that was media or cultural icons.
Mhm.
I was all over that. So I mean, yeah, like I was saying, I've got tons of VHS tapes, like probably I don't know 200, 300, and
Mhm.
all kinds of DVDs. I've kept a lot of my sort of old stuff from the '80s, just stuff that I find interesting. On some of the Star Wars stuff, kind of got well used and thrown out over time, but yeah, I never was one that just sort of keep it in the box and it's just like you bought it, it's meant to be used for a specific reason, so the you take it out and you play with it and you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which Metallica album was that?
uh it was and Justice for All.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Oh man, that's so my daughter loves Metallica, and it's interesting to see them still sticking around after all these years, right? And still having an audience.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had debated going to Edmonton because actually tonight there's a Metallica concert in Edmonton,
Mm.
and then they're playing again on Sunday, and so I was like, should I go, should I go? So yeah,
Next time, get them next time.
next time,
They're not.
exactly.
It doesn't seem like they're slowing down anytime soon.
No, no.
So when you shoot your videos, like, is it like you have a plan ahead of time, or you just wake up and decide what you're going to talk about, or how do you decide?
Well, basically, what I do is I kind of pull out maybe 6 or 8 albums that I want to talk about for a week, and then I just sort of look through them, and then I'll play them on my nice home stereo, and then I'll just say, okay, well, what song really speaks to me that I want to do on my little suitcase recorder, and then so I'll figure out sort of which videos that I want to put out and kind of what order, because sometimes you have a bit of a theme with them, sometimes you just sort of wing it, but generally you try not to do too much of the same thing. So you kind of like grab something from the 50s rock and roll, and then you grab something, say, from the 80s, and then you go back to the 60s, and you sort of ping pong back and forth a little bit.
And sometimes you do it after, like, you did a thing about the Olympics. During the Olympics, you did a bunch of songs off of the couple of Olympic albums you had. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was kind of interesting because I mean, obviously with the hype around the Olympics, if there's any way you can kind of tie into sort of what's going on socially at the time, um, and unfortunately there's only ever really been two Olympic albums, which I happen to have both of, so it's like, okay, well, for these next couple weeks I'm going to be playing every song that I can find off these two albums. And yeah, that's when I kind of was showing my trick with the quarters and things like that, because those ones were in not the best shape, and so they tend to bounce around a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, I had no idea. Like, other than I remember when Canada had the Olympics in 2010, there was very distinct music around that. And I guess there probably is every year, right? And I just don't think about it. And the only other thing I could think about when it comes to the Olympics was, of course, the John Williams score from the 1984 Olympics. And you had that album. The other one was from the 1988 Seoul Olympics, which is also one I remember pretty distinctly as a kid. But yeah, that's
But
very cool. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but the thing that I found with the Olympics is that that only seems to be a Summer Olympics thing. Like, I tried to find something from the Calgary '88 Olympics. There was nothing,
Hmm.
and there really wasn't a CD from the 2010 Vancouver Olympics
But there was
either.
like a
So,
single. Remember that single? There was that girl who
oh
sang
yeah,
a song.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
They
I
played it
remember
every
that, but
freaking commercial break.
but there wasn't like an actual album that had
Okay.
really a theme to it, or a bunch of music that was composed specifically for that event. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's so cool, and I think that. And so, can you do you ever jump off of trends like TikTok trends and things that you see? You said your other account was kind of based on gamifying the system a bit. Do you do that on this account?
No, what I try and do is because this is more of a passion thing there, I just sort of play it straight. And but if there's something that's going on like the Olympics, I mean, obviously you leverage off of that. But I don't have any Taylor Swift albums or anything like that, so that it's nothing that I can kind of go with what's going on currently right now.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, not even Rogers is above that kind of thing. Rogers,
Yeah.
you seen that ad with John Krasinski uh,
Oh, that's so
dancing?
cringy.
That's awful. But I saw some other ad. It was a Rogers ad that just had the song, the same Taylor Swift song from that ad. Just shake it off. I'm like, they're just really milking the Taylor Swift to try and get people to click on their ads. Anyway, uh,
Yeah, and that's it. Because I mean, uh, like when I first got onto TikTok, I was just trying to figure out what sort of makes things go viral, and then so you look around and you see the trends of dancing and all the rest of it, and I, well, that's silly. I'm not going to do that as a late '50s guy, and uh, and then uh, but the whole ability to take a trend and then put your own little spin on it there is a little bit of an art. And then so, unfortunately, with vinyl albums, they're a little bit more of a niche kind of a thing to like I say, from sort of 40 to 75 age range. So some of these cultural things that are really trending. Not really the demographic that's sort of on top of that. There, we uh, Gen Xers tend to be a little bit behind the curve. A little,
fair. That's very true. But you don't have a younger, you don't have any younger followers or anybody at all, like who's a younger. I know a lot of my like I teach at university or at post secondary level, so some of my students collect vinyl, right? It's still
yeah.
popular amongst the 20 somethings.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm not saying that I don't have younger followers. I mean, some of the people I follow and they follow me back and we comment on each other's stuff. I mean, yeah, they look like they're early to mid 20s. So yeah, it definitely there are younger folks out there. Actually, there's one guy, he's going to university, I think in his first year of university. He's really big into 40s and 50s kind of swing music and orchestra type arrangements, which you really wouldn't expect at that age. But yeah, that seems to be his deal for 78 records. So
I tell you, these kids, my son, my oldest is 18 and he likes jazz. He just kind of let that drop the other day. I'm like, oh, really? I've never had an interest in jazz music. I mean, it's not bad or anything. I just don't really love it or anything, but he just, yeah, he does like it. And I think that's interesting. And my daughter, like I said, likes Metallica, but is really loves heavy metal. That's her passion. And I think that's just, it's something I liked as a teenager, just because an angry teenager, that genre really fits well. But I've kind of outgrown it, I feel. But I did take her to a heavy metal show the other day, which was a lot of fun. So I just find it interesting that these genres of music continue to kind of come back and continue to stay alive even after all these years.
Oh, absolutely. Like when I grew up, it was punk was a big thing there, and so yeah, I kind of was angry in my own different way at that time. And but yeah, it I have all my old punk records from back in the day, but I have tons of jazz and blues too. So
Mhm.
it's like once you kind of decide that you like music, it's amazing how your tastes will change and evolve, and you incorporate new things over time.
Mhm. Do
Yeah.
you use
So
TikTok for TikTok or do you use like hashtags or anything like that when you post?
usually I'll throw five or six on that are sort of relevant to what I actually am putting on my video. So usually the album will have a year. I'll put that on. I'll put the title on. I'll put the artist, the song. Uh, Sometimes if there's something specific around the song itself, like I don't know, San Francisco or something like that, uh, that's part of the song. I'll put some of those in. But usually I try not to go too crazy with it because I see some people that they put in like 30 or 40 different hashtags, and to me that just seems like way too much work.
I think it's too much work. Yeah, for sure, it's too much work. But it's also, I think it stops looking at them after the first few. I think yeah, five or six seems about right to me. I used to struggle with that because I would see like just huge clouds of hashtags underneath, and that just yeah, it can't take the time. It's hard enough typing six of them in there, man. I don't know. It's
Yeah, there's kind of two schools of thought because some people they say don't use hashtags at all, and I've tried videos that don't have any hashtags whatsoever, and those ones seem to do just as well as the other ones. So yeah, it's kind of hard to say. So
there's so much we don't know about how all this works, eh?
yeah, well, it's interesting because you can see that the algorithm has changed over the past couple of years that I've been on, and some of the things that worked. a couple of years ago with like very targeted hashtags or really broad, where you put FYP in as a hashtag, and it actually seemed to work. If you do that now, nobody even notices at all. So
Yeah, and other things like it used to be that if you started your video on the same kind of image, that was good, that people kind of came back to it. But now I don't think people do. Now I see people like starting off, they're taking a clip from later in the video and giving us kind of a tease. I've noticed that trend lately, where they're like kind of showing us a little bit, and then it gets into the video and we see the rest of it. Have you ever seen those?
yeah,
Yeah.
or the other one that that I'll see is that right at the very tail end of the video, you'll have a phrase that actually um, ties in with the very start of the video, so it becomes like this seamless loop. And
Right.
then so
Yeah.
if you Yeah, so if you're not really paying attention, then you're like, "Hey, I listened to this already," and you've already listened to it like 1.5 times. But as far as the algorithm's concerned, you've actually kind of got a little bump because of watch time or a little bit more engagement that way.
Yeah, that's right. I've noticed another thing that like very annoyingly, clips don't start and stop very well. But I think that's deliberate, so they seem to blend more in together. Oh wow. So all these little tricks, eh?
Yeah, yeah, that is something that I don't usually try and do because I mean, mine is just kind of like a story. Here's what I got. Here's here's my album that it came off of. Here's either my little record player, or sometimes I'll put a little video clip of the artist actually doing the song live or something like that, and then just a little sign off. See you next time, and then sometimes there I'll put something in to try and bump the engagement a little bit of tell me what you want next time, or if this strikes a chord with you, send me a message and I'll do more of it, or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, I usually ask well, I don't always ask a question, but I often ask a question at the end of my movie videos, as far as like, tell me what your favorite line is from this or whatever, just to get people talking about it. I want to do so I do like the trivia videos are easy. It's one take. I just read off the card. I had to make myself a little thing so I don't see the answers on these specific cards that I have. But
Hmm.
it's now that I've got it down, I can do it super easy. And sometimes I'll do a bunch of those in a row and just have that done for the week, and that'll that'll be easy. Also the movie review videos I do, where it's just my voiceover images from the film. That's also fairly easy now because I've done a bunch of them. I've probably done thousands of them by now. And so I just write a little script, voice it, and put it underneath the trailer from the film, basically. I want
Right.
to do a third kind of video. I want to get it down so I can do 3 videos a day. How many videos do you post a day? One?
It's one, sometimes two,
Okay.
but yeah, generally I try and do at least one a day.
I want to try and post 3 a day, but I don't know. This third one, maybe not. The third one might be too involved for me to be able to do every day. But I do want to do kind of those talking head videos. You know, the ones where you see the guy like da 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 da, and his head's over here, da 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 da. He's talking over screenshots, right?
Yeah, I've done those ones as well,
Yeah,
where you kind of got a green screen of something,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then so yeah, so you've got your image kind of off to the side, and you're pointing at something that's on the green screen. Yep, and yeah, I've done those in the past, and uh, part of it is that I had to do that on a bunch of them back earlier this spring because I'm not sure if you were following what was happening in the media. Is that the Universal Musical Group
I
and
remember.
TikTok were fighting over royalty and licensing of music, and then so what was happening is that it seemed that maybe 80% of the videos were actually getting muted because the license was UMG, and then so a lot of times you're kind of going around that, where you would actually have an image of the album, and then you would just sort of speak to what the album was, and you would point to things and say, well, I'd like to actually play this for you, but because of licensing I can't, and blah blah blah. But yeah, that actually works really well, just to kind of layer in one of those every now and then.
And it's just, I think, for doing those, do you have like, have you worked out how to make them, like a process for creating them?
It's just part of the either CapCut or TikTok itself there, because there's a green screen filter where you can either have a video that you can put yourself in as your head off to the side,
Yeah, yeah.
and you can either speak or turn the volume of the video up or down so that you can have that mostly muted and you can be talking at, say, the same volume as whatever the content is, or you can just have it as just a static image of a picture of whatever it is.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start doing these. I'm going to try and do more of them. I'm trying to find something that I want to talk about that I'm passionate about, and I can beat off the trolls with. Like, that doesn't sound right. One thing I was gonna start talking about is movie theaters. You go to the movies often?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
I love going to the theaters, and it's just it's the best experience. And unfortunately, they haven't really bounced back as much in BC. So that I would say the times that I go, there's like maybe a third is like the fullest that I've seen. But I mean, it's still a great experience.
Yeah, I think that I agree, and it's not just in BC; it's everywhere. I think movie theaters are still struggling. Hollywood seems to be struggling in a lot of ways, even though they're still releasing these giant blockbuster movies. But I'll probably start talking about that kind of stuff more because I feel like I just nobody's talking to each other. There's all these different companies that are just looking to make money as best they can, but they're all kind of fighting against each other, and nobody's working together. Because it used to be much more straightforward as far as films being released, right? You had your theatrical run, and the film came out in the theater for however long, couple weeks, couple months maybe, and then it went dark. Three
Yep.
months. I worked at Blockbuster Video. It was at least 3 months, right? And then it went dark, and then it would come out on video. And it was, of course, we had home video VHS for the 80s, and then most of the 90s, and then we had DVD come out at the tail end of the 90s. But it was the same thing even with DVD. They would still come out. They had that gap, and I think the current system has taken away that gap. Right now, you see movies going into the theaters, and then they're out in a week or two, and then they're on streaming a month later. And so, why would anybody go see it in the theater when they know it's going to be on streaming a month later, right? Takes away the
Yeah.
incentive.
Well, I find there that it is more the experience itself of being kind of in that environment, where you've got like the Dolby THX surround, and it's just infinitely larger scale than anything you'd ever have with a home theater experience. Because the last movie I saw in the theater was Civil War, and that was just amazing to see on the big screen.
They talk about things like, oh, this is a movie you have to see in the theater. Go see it in the theater, as though the movie itself is the reason you should go. When really, you're right. It is the experience is the reason you should go. And I think they've gotten away from that a little bit. Or they're trying to distract us with other things, with like big at the theaters here, they have big, elaborate game areas where the kids go to play for tickets and stuff and prizes. That's in every single movie theater now.
Mhm.
Tons of food, expensive food, beer, all this stuff. Basically, they want you to spend so much money there. And it just kind of ruins that experience for me. It takes away from like, I just want to go there and watch a movie, get some popcorn, get a soda, and sit down and watch a movie for a couple hours. Then I'm gonna leave. I'm not gonna sit there and play games and stuff and hang out with my friends and talk about the movie. That kind of gets me.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I grew up watching the movies too. Because oftentimes I go on afternoon and catch a matinee in a revival theater of something from the 60s or the 70s, and you'd be like six people sitting in the theater on a 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and that was a great way to watch a film.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think people these days they just don't have that experience where it has to be like dialed up to 11 constantly.
Yeah, well, one of the things I notice also when I go to the theater is it's super loud. Like the volume is just unbelievable. And I think another thing they're trying to do, it seems like, so you didn't see, I assume you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet.
No, not yet.
Okay, so what they did with that one, they tried to use FOMO to get you to go to the theater because there's so much things to be spoiled in that movie that if you
Mhm.
really cared about it, you had to go see it and that first weekend, right? Otherwise, you would have found out all the things that happen in it.
Yeah, and that's specifically why I haven't looked at any of the reviews or anything like that, because I do have that on my list of movies to go see. And
Hmm.
then so once sort of what crowds that we do get currently go away, then I can go and see it in peace where I'm part of six people like
Okay, that's
It's my preference.
I see what you're saying there. Yeah, yeah. I mean, but there is something to be said about going to see a movie first night, packed theater, everyone experiencing it together for the first time. That's an experience I really miss.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I've had it both ways there where you're kind of like, there's just tons and tons of people and you're just all laughing at the same time. And it just, the crowd becomes part of the whole experience. But then there's other times there you're just like, okay, well, I just want to be by myself quietly and focus on what I'm actually watching.
Hmm. Yeah. So getting back, are you going to continue just doing what you're doing? K-Tel records, or well, you don't just do K-Tel, you do all kinds of records, but mostly K-Tel.
Yeah, yeah, basically that seems to be kind of my niche. And then might do say a little bit more Gen Xy type things that isn't it just not sort of talking about, well, back in 1985 we used to slide down the hill or we threw snowballs at each other with rocks in it and things like that. But
Did that? Nobody did that. Nobody did that to me. What are you talking about?
exactly.
Oh man, I
But
find it anything with that kind of content it has to be offering some sort of commentary from now, from this day. Like I like people
yeah.
who will do recaps of TV shows and then make jokes or do things along the way, so we're kind of remembering it, but also laughing at how cheesy it is, or laughing at some other thing or whatever. Right? That's what I really like.
Oh, absolutely. There's one guy out there that he does old videotapes that people send him. His name is Matt McCarthy,
Matt McCarthy.
and
Yep.
yeah, I love that guy. I watch his stuff every single day, where you get those '80s commercials that you remember, like the what's the beef,
Where's the beef?
Wendy's commercials, and just all of these random things there that you didn't think about and yeah, you see it on a videotape and it kind of triggers that memory. So yeah, if there's a way that I can kind of leverage some of that into what I'm doing, that
Yeah.
yeah, he really seems to have tapped a chord with that approach.
I actually I'm TikTok friends with Matt. I had him on I interviewed him for CTV last year when I used to work for CTV. And he's a super nice guy, and I'm gonna try and get him on this podcast. I think he'd be super interesting because I didn't really talk to him too much about the TikTok side of it. It was mostly just about the collecting and the VHS side of it. But I'd be curious to know because he does things like he has that whole thing where he does t-shirt available, link in the bio. He like the same phrase every single time where he moves it around though in the video. Like it used to be at the
Yeah,
beginning, then he puts it at a different part, and he moves like his opening to a different part in the video. That's what I'm talking about, where people are kind of switching it up and changing up the
yeah.
beginning stuff.
Yeah, I've done that too, because sometimes there, if you kind of have the same sort of a catchphrase, it gets a little bit tiresome. So yeah, I try and move around my house a little bit, which is pretty easy to do because how I record my stuff, it's all in the uh, same room usually, but once in a while I'll move it down in my basement or yeah, I think I'll move that around a little bit. But what I found with my other accounts that I used to have is that the walking and talking kind of stream of consciousness
Mhm.
TikToks worked really, really well. Like when I was doing the internet marketing thing. So I'd be walking along in a pathway somewhere talking about some internet marketing thing. And just because you have activity and the scene is changing, that really did a lot. But if you've got something there where you've got like a static piece of media that you're talking about and reviewing, you can't really do that. I guess I could walk around my backyard with a record album, but that would seem kind of silly.
Yeah, and well, I mean, yours has movement with the record moving, and you do have the image does change because you change the album cover, right, every time, so that also
Yeah,
changes it up. But I think there's something that works really well about yours in this format. I think it's just kind of perfect.
yeah, and I think that's just part of doing it for so long and trying some different things, and sort of all my past mistakes and errors have all been wiped away by the TikTok gods of canceling those accounts. So I've learned enough to not make mistakes again. And like you say, there you just mix it up a little bit just
Now
by having different content all the time. Yeah,
you can use your knowledge for good, not evil.
exactly.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, I've enjoyed the heck out of it, and yeah, I can't wait to listen to the podcast, and yeah, and I'll happily be following, doing my 3 questions a day.
Sounds good. Thanks. And thank you very much for being my TikTok friend. All right, there you go. He's a super interesting guy, lots of fun to talk to, and he posts very cool stuff on TikTok. You can see him post all about his record collection, a different record every day, and I think they work really well in the TikTok format. You see the record, you see the album cover, and he plays it, and sometimes he gets an audience. He does these in the park, and I remember one video recently he posted, and he was in the park in BC where he lives. Beautiful day, and then he got an audience of Canadian geese gathering around this portable record player he was using in the middle of the park. It's very cool stuff. Anyway, go check out my K-Tel record collection if that sounds like the kind of stuff you like to see on TikTok. And for next episode, I am going to be posting in 2 weeks' time, so it's going to be posted on October 14th. You can expect a chat with my next guest. Who is it going to be? Well, you're just going to have to come back and find out. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And be sure to come back next time when I introduce you to another one of my TikTok friends.